Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Richard, today we're going to talk about the difference between romantic love, true love, and committed love.
Right.
There's subtle differences. And now, I guess going into this, we should talk about the fact that there's lots of other types of love.
Right.
I mean, you know, the love that you have for somebody that's a platonic relationship, love that you have for somebody who's a relative. You know, certainly there's a difference between the way that you love your siblings versus your children versus your parents. Those are all slightly different variants. But today we're going to talk about sort of romantic love and true love and committed love.
You know, I have to say, as we were preparing for this week, we've been talking about doing this for a couple of weeks, and as I was preparing for this week, I kept running into this notion of romantic love. And I have to say, romantic love takes a bit of a beating for most of these writers. And they really caution us about romantic love. It's an area that I don't spend a lot of time reading about.
Right.
But boy, the message is clear.
Oh, yeah.
Be very careful with romantic love.
Right.
And so we're going to begin talking about that today, and we'll talk about it a couple of other times this week.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, we're talking or pulling information from two different articles today.
Right.
One is from the Huffington Post, and that one is entitled "The Difference Between Romantic Love and True Love."
Right.
And the other is from a Dr. Will Meek.
Right.
And it is from his website. He's a psychologist, and he talks about the difference between romantic love and committed love.
Right. And I found this it's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
The difference between these two. So these two do go together.
Right.
And we're going to start with the first from Huffington.
Yeah. And we're going to pull from both a little bit, but it'll be you guys will see what's going on. But you should read both.
You'll get it.
You should read both articles.
Yeah, they're both
really good.
They're both worth reading.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit then first about romantic love. Right. And I like the approach that both authors take in talking about romantic love from the perspective of it's often what we see. It's what we they talk about it in terms of television programs and movies and stories and all this stuff the idea of love is very much so consistent with what they're referring to as romantic love.
That's right. This made me think of two things. One is we just finished the Christmas season. Right. And during the Christmas season, you have these Hallmark movies, right. Hallmark classic, about, and it's all about romantic love. Every one of them is about, there's this formula, right. But the stories are, and they're watched every year. People look forward to the Hallmark movies. And the other is, I watch Turner Classic Movies, and a lot of those old movies are about this type of romantic love. And so we learn about love by watching movies or watching TV programs. And we get this concept of romantic love that we sort of internalize and say, well, that's what I should be searching. That's what should happen to me. Right. I should be looking for this kind of what is called romantic love. And that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I plan to do after I find the right person.
Right. So much of what we talk about when we're thinking about romantic love is this sort of, it's a pretty abstract thing, but it's that idea that it's this automatic connection that is just overwhelming and overpowerful, and you walk into a bookstore and you look over and the two of you make eye contact and
the angels sing.
Yes.
Right? The love angels sing. Right.
Sometimes the way that they are talking about it in these articles, it's very much consistent with what we think of, love at first sight.
Right.
And well, as we're going to talk about it, and as you said a moment ago, romantic love takes a bit of a beating here because that's not typical.
And it doesn't last.
Right.
Those initial feelings that we have, doesn't matter how we refer to them, what word we use to refer to them, but those initial feelings that we have don't last.
Right.
Let me correct myself. They last if you work at it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They don't sustain, those feelings will fade, and they don't sustain themselves. They have to be sustained.
Right.
Okay. So.
Yeah, and there's a number of reasons why it doesn't typically sustain. One is, when you think about some of these scenarios, you're in the bookstore, you're at a concert, or you're somewhere, and you see that other person, and you make eye contact, and you then spend the next 5 hours talking. That whole story. The reality is that both of you are not your typical self during that time.
True.
You are working very hard to create this connection with somebody, and you're working really hard to, be the person that you idealize yourself as being.
You are your best self at those times.
Because anybody can be their best. Well, not anybody. Many people can be their best self for a few days.
Right. That's right. Even I can behave for a couple of days, right?
Sort of.
But this initial attraction, and we call it attractiveness theory, we don't, or at least I don't know of any research that tells us why you're attracted to one person and not another person.
Right.
And all of us do it.
Right.
Okay. We all have something in our brain somewhere that looks for a match.
Right.
And because there are in my lifetime, there are many beautiful women that I wasn't the least bit attracted to. Okay. And we don't know what that is.
Right.
Why are you attracted to her and not her? Okay.
Right.
Or why are you attracted to him and not him? So the initial attraction is something that we probably don't understand very well, and has something to do with what's going on in our brain related to attractiveness theory.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mate selection or something like that.
Exactly. And it has to do, the only research that I've seen with it, talks about sort of works to create this generalized concept of what people refer to as attractive.
Right.
And it's very basic, and it's not at all consistent and reliable, because it talks about, of course, symmetry, and it talks about, how things are proportioned on your face and in your body and everything. Right. And the challenge, of course, with that is that very few people meet those criteria. Right. And so, all right, so that's great that we all find those characteristics attractive, but how does that relate to why I found this person attractive?
That particular individual, right? And we really don't know that.
Not sure. It does. There's certainly some chemical release that happens in our brain that related to oxytocin and some of those kinds of things.
And I've read things about the stage, the different times of the month, that different types of people are attracted to other types of people, and sometimes you want an adventuresome person, sometimes you want a contemplative person, depending on where you are in that month. So, but it's a mysterious process that we really don't understand very well.
Right. But the bottom line is, when it comes to romantic love, we often that's sort of the idealized, that sort of I don't want to say mythical, but it's the storybook.
Right. The storybook romance.
Right.
That I'm going to find Mr. Right. But we're looking for Mr. Right.
Right. Now, when it comes to true love, that's a slightly different phenomenon. And this is the type of love that where you're connected to each other, and it is it doesn't it's like the romantic love, but it doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily so situational. It can last much longer, and it doesn't. The words that keep coming into my mind are, it doesn't take as much work, but I don't mean that it's not work, because it's always work.
True love?
True love, yeah.
Oh, yes.
It still requires a great deal of work, but it's if you get through that romantic love phase, the true love is the love that relationship continues to use.
That's right.
Right?
Once you get through the initial phase, there's this initial attraction, and that's supposed to happen biologically. Right. So that happens.
Right.
But true love is the love that you grow and nurture, even though the romantic love begins to fade. Right. And the romantic love will begin to fade.
Always does.
It's not that it goes away. It transforms into something else and something more important.
Right.
Because now I have a partner, not just attractive. It's, there's more to it, but that requires effort and that requires work.
Right.
Because now you're taking a person who not only are you initially attracted to, but now you're saying, I will be with you despite our differences.
Despite the messiness.
Despite the work, despite the fact that we're going to argue, despite the fact that we don't agree on everything. That's a different kind of love when we talk about that's a different kind of love, and it's a deeper and more sustaining love than the initial one.
Right. Yeah, and so, as you said, it does take work, so it didn't, I didn't want to make it sound like it was easy, but it takes work, but it is that relationship that you have with someone, or that feeling you have with someone when, like I keep imagining that the romantic love, you see that person and, you have that sort of idealized image of that person from that initial meeting. And then you see them the next time, and instead of wearing that cool outfit that he was wearing the first time you met him, he's in like cut off jeans and,
ragged
a tank top, and it's like
sweaty.
That's not exactly what I saw last time. But the true love would help you move beyond that to maintain. Whereas romantic love, if you saw him like that for the very first time, you may not have that attraction.
And when you talk to people who are in arranged marriages from other countries, that's how they describe it.
Right.
Because you will ask them, well, how long have you been together? Well, we've been together 10 years or 12 years. Well, did you love each other when you first? And they said no.
Right.
But we were told that this was the person we were going to marry. But over time, we have developed this relationship.
Right.
Okay. And so arranged marriages can work. They don't always work, but they can work for the same reason that the kind of relationships that we have work. That you have to transform romantic love into true love. Right.
Now, the third type is the committed love. And this is from Dr. Meek's side. And he acknowledges that we don't see a lot of good examples of committed love.
Right. That's
Instead what we get is, we see, and we talk about how cute it is when we see elderly couples walking and holding hands, and they've been together for 60 years, and and we see that, and I think the way that he differentiates true love from committed love is that while true love is that what keeps everything going, when you talk to some of these couples who've been together for a very long time, that commitment is there, and the commitment kept them going in the relationship, even when it could have easily been over.
That's right.
You talk to some of these couples, and you find out that there were there could have been any number of problems earlier in their relationship, but they had a commitment to one another, and that commitment love saw them through it, even if other types of love wasn't there at the time.
Through good times and bad.
Right. Yeah. So committed love sort of is what will help it endure. Right. Even I guess it's fair to say, even if the true love will wax and wane, the committed love, that dedication to each other, that commitment to each other, that seriousness for the relationship that you have with each other, that's the committed love that keeps things going through.
That's right. That I'm going to stay in this because I've made a commitment.
Right.
And I'm going to honor my commitment.
Right.
Okay. And that's another step in the evolution between romantic and true to commitment.
Right.
I'm doing this because I committed to it, and we're going to make it through our differences. We're going to survive the ups and downs because we have committed.
Right.
The problem is, and I don't want to underplay this, it takes two people to make the same commitment.
Right.
One partner can't sustain this. Okay, and that's the other thing that we want to make clear is that one person can't keep doing this. It requires two people to want to work through the messiness, to work through the problems, to have acts of kindness and acts of forgiveness. And you each have to be doing that. As long as each person is doing that, you can do it. You can survive these things.
Right.
If only one person is doing it, or if neither is doing it, of course you can't. So if you find two people who think that romantic love is all there is, that marriage is not going to last.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
There's no way, because they're not willing to do the hard work to go to the next stage.
And the committed love is the love that helps bridge gaps.
Right.
So you can have the romantic love, and then true love can take over and carry through. And then what happens in a lot of relationships is something happens, whether it's we know that relationships struggle when the kids leave the house,
right.
and we know that relationships struggle when if they have kids with developmental or medical problems. We know that relationships troubled with
right.
financial issues or fidelity
right.
and those kinds of things. But we also know a lot of couples that experience that, especially things like infidelity, which you would think would end the relationship right. at that mm-hmm. moment. And people stay together and work through those issues. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people look back and say, well, how in the world did that happen? At those times, the person, their true love is at a low.
Right.
They may not
mm-hmm.
they may not really have that same feeling of true love for one another. Right. But they love each other through that commitment.
That's right.
And they say, we're going to work through this together, and we're going to get through things.
The commitment keeps it going.
Yes,
right.
yes. So the commitment is sort of what bridges those gaps, because
right.
there is some overlap between commitment love and true love.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. When we talk about true love, the woman who wrote, it is a woman, the woman who wrote mm-hmm. that about true love. It says very clearly, if she had clung to this notion mm-hmm. of romantic love, mm-hmm. if she had thought that I need to have romantic love
right.
forever, she said we would have ended up in divorce a long time
sure.
ago, because they learned very early in their marriage that the romantic love
right.
lessen.
Mm-hmm.
It dissipates. But they replaced it with all the hard work that you need
right.
to do to keep their relationship going. And she said one of the things that they did to have a healthy relationship, the two things she mentioned, is the ability to communicate.
Right.
Okay. That you have to be communicating with each other, but also that you avoid the other's triggers.
Right.
And so often in relationships, we purposely use triggers to make the other person angry.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And she's saying in this, no, you have to agree to avoid those triggers. Right. If I know that there are certain things and over time you learn mm-hmm. what not to say. Right. And what not to do. And you have to respect. Mm-hmm. You have to have enough respect for the other person to avoid that person's triggers. You just can't do that, because right. it damages the relationship.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to get more into that in Thursday's
right.
podcast, Thursday and Friday's podcast.
And the other thing I love about her, and I think I want to tell this, as I was reading these, I thought I have to remind my kids. My kids are young adults, and she says, love is not something that happens to you. Mm-hmm. It's a choice that you make. Right. True love is a choice that you make right. by your actions. It's not something that happens to you, and she said, it's not something you fall into.
Right.
We always say, I want to fall in love with somebody.
Right.
True love is not something you fall into. True
right.
love is something you make happen with hard work and dedication mm-hmm. and devotion and kindness and respect. Yeah. So I have to talk to my kids about this at some point today or tomorrow. Certainly before Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, all right.
So all good fodder for Valentine's Day.
Yes. So thinking about that.
Right. That's right.
All right. Anything else? You put your glasses back on.
Well, I was going to mention one other thing, but I can. Shoot. Yes, I will mention one other thing.
I knew you would.
Okay. If a relationship dissolves, mm-hmm. she said, and because people weren't doing the work. Mm-hmm. She says, and I think I agree with her on this, she said, you either never did love the other person, mm-hmm. or you have chosen otherwise. Mm-hmm. But it is a choice. To have true love mm-hmm. is to choose to be willing to do the work that's necessary to have a relationship. So she said, if your relationship has dissolved, either one of you didn't love, mm-hmm. or somebody has chosen otherwise. But it's a choice.
Mm. And I opted not to mention that because I'm still processing that in my mind a little bit. I'm not sure that I agree.
I know. That's what that's why I was reluctant to mention it. But food for thought.
Because I think we change over time, and sometimes when we change because of life circumstances, because mm-hmm. of things that happen, it doesn't mean that you didn't have those feelings for that person before. It just means that you are a different person now than you were before.
That would be a good third option. You could say either you never did, or you did but it changed, or you've chosen otherwise.
Right.
That's a good third option, actually.
That's what I think.
Okay.
All right, that's it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and don't forget to be afraid. Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patreon.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.